She was invisible. Just another waitress in a Georgetown restaurant. Until the night Aaliyah Brooks whispered,
こんにちは、書類に署名しないでください。偽物です。
to expose a $900 million fraud. Now the billionaire she saved wants to change her life. But some gifts come when they are needed most. Welcome to our channel Life in Stories, where cultures collide and courage speaks every language. If you love stories of underdogs rising, corporate intrigue, and unexpected connections, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell. Join our growing family of storytellers celebrating diverse voices worldwide. The crystal chandeliers of Le Bernardin cast dancing shadows across the private dining room, their light catching on the rim of wine glasses and the polished silverware arranged with military precision. Outside, a November rain drummed against the windows of the Georgetown establishment, creating rivulets that distorted the view of Washington's evening lights. Mayumi Takashi sat with the stillness of a woman who had learned that power often resided in silence. At 57, she commanded Takashi Holdings with the same quiet authority that had built it from a small electronics firm in Osaka to a multinational empire worth billions. Her dark hair, streaked with dignified silver, was pulled back in an elegant chignon. She wore a simple black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, though she chose it not for its price but for its understated elegance. Across from her sat three men in expensive suits that couldn't quite hide their eagerness. John Miller, the lead negotiator, kept adjusting his gold cufflinks, a nervous habit he'd developed over 20 years of closing deals, though none quite as substantial as this one. To his left, William Scott provided the technical expertise, his tablet never far from his fingertips. The third man, Andrew Turner, served as their legal counsel, his briefcase containing documents that had been prepared with meticulous care, though not the kind of care one might expect for a legitimate business transaction. Mrs. Takashi, Miller began, his smile practiced and wide, we're absolutely thrilled to be finalizing this partnership. $900 million. It's a testament to your vision and our shared confidence in the Asian market expansion. Mayumi nodded slightly, her expression revealing nothing. Her translator, Kenji Yamamoto, leaned forward to convey her response, but she raised a hand gently. In carefully pronounced English, she said, "Thank you, Mr. Miller. I appreciate your enthusiasm." Behind her back, Scott and Turner exchanged glances. Turner muttered under his breath, just loud enough for his colleagues but pitched to escape the translator's notice. Can barely string a sentence together. This is almost too easy. The waitstaff moved through the room like shadows, trained in the art of invisible service. Among them was Aaliyah Brooks, whose graceful movements belied the weight of her attention. At 21, she possessed the kind of beauty that turned heads, high cheekbones, expressive dark eyes, and natural hair pulled back in a professional bun. But it was her ears that were working overtime tonight, catching fragments of conversation in multiple languages as she'd been trained to do in an entirely different life. Aaliyah had learned early that being invisible had its advantages. The skill had served her well in the orphanage, where being noticed often meant being singled out for punishment. It had served her even better in Hiroshima, where her foster parents, the Yamadas, had taken her when she was 8 years old. They'd given her more than a home. They'd given her a language, a culture, and a sense of belonging she'd never known before. The Yamadas had been patient teachers. Hiroshi Yamada worked as a translator for international businesses, while his wife Yuki taught English at the local university. They'd seen potential in the quiet girl with observant eyes and had nurtured it carefully. Under their guidance, Aaliyah had become fluent in Japanese, learning not just the language but the subtle cultural nuances that no textbook could teach. Now, 3 years after returning to America, those skills remained sharp despite her current circumstances. The restaurant job was supposed to be temporary, just until she figured out her next move. But temporary had a way of becoming permanent when you needed to eat and pay rent. More wine, ma'am. Aaliyah asked softly, approaching Mayumi's elbow with a bottle of the 2015 Chateau Margaux that Miller had ordered with a flourish. Mayumi glanced up, and for a moment their eyes met. Something passed between them, a recognition perhaps of one outsider to another. Mayumi nodded, and Aaliyah poured with steady hands. Kenji-san, Mayumi said to her translator in rapid Japanese, I need to review the exact terms once more before we proceed. Yamamoto began explaining the contract details, his voice measured and professional. The American team waited with barely concealed impatience, Turner drumming his fingers silently on the table. Actually, Miller interjected, I think we've covered all the major points. The expansion rights, the technology transfer, the profit sharing, it's all there in black and white. He slid the contract across the table, a Mont Blanc pen placed strategically beside it. We just need your signature, and we can wire the initial investment by Monday morning. Mayumi studied the document, her reading glasses perched delicately on her nose. To the Americans, she appeared to be struggling with the English text, occasionally asking Yamamoto for clarification on certain terms. In reality, her English comprehension was far better than she let on, a strategic advantage she'd cultivated over decades of international business. Excuse me, Yamamoto said suddenly, rising from his chair. I apologize, but I must step away for a moment. As he headed toward the restroom, Miller's smile widened imperceptibly. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. Without the translator present, they could apply more pressure, relying on Mayumi's apparent limited English to push through any last-minute hesitations. Mrs. Takashi, Turner leaned forward, speaking slowly and loudly as if volume could bridge the language gap. This deal is time-sensitive. You understand. Must sign now. Scott pulled out his phone, showing her a clock app. Deadline, he said, tapping the screen. Tonight. Or deal is gone. Mayumi's face remained impassive, but Aaliyah, refilling water glasses at the adjacent service station, caught the predatory gleam in the men's eyes. Her hands stilled on the crystal pitcher. Just get her to sign it, Miller muttered to Turner. She won't even know what hit her until the funds are transferred to the Cayman accounts. By then, the shell company will have dissolved, and that technology will be ours free and clear. 900 million for nothing, Scott added with a soft chuckle. The beauty is, it's all technically legal. She's signing over the rights voluntarily. Her lawyers won't be able to touch us. Keep your voice down, Turner hissed, but he was smiling. Though I doubt the waitress speaks English, let alone understands international finance. Aaliyah's grip on the water pitcher tightened. The irony wasn't lost on her. They assumed she couldn't understand English while plotting against a woman they assumed couldn't understand English. The layers of deception and assumption made her stomach turn. She watched as Miller pushed the pen closer to Mayumi, his body language aggressive despite his maintained smile. Sign here, Mrs. Takashi. Here. He pointed repeatedly at the signature line, his finger stabbing at the paper. Mayumi picked up the pen, her movements deliberate. She looked at the document once more, then at the men across from her. Their eagerness was palpable, filling the room like a noxious gas. Aaliyah made her decision in a heartbeat. Her job, her invisibility, her careful maintenance of boundaries. None of it mattered as much as what was about to happen. She'd been raised by people who valued honor above profit, integrity above advancement. The Yamadas hadn't sent her back to America to stand by while someone was robbed in front of her. Moving with purpose now, she approached the table with the wine bottle. As she leaned in to top off Mayumi's glass, she spoke in quiet, perfectly accented Japanese.
こんにちは、書類に署名しないでください。偽物です。
The words flowed from her lips like water. Hello, ma'am. Please do not sign the documents, they are fake. Mayumi's hand froze above the paper. Her eyes, sharp as obsidian, flicked to Aaliyah's face. The young woman kept her expression professionally neutral, as if she'd said nothing more than a pleasantry about the wine.
自分が何を言っているのか確かですか?
Mayumi's response was equally quiet. Are you sure of what you are saying? Aaliyah continued pouring, her hands steady despite her racing heart.
はい、奥様。私は彼らがあなたが署名しようとしている偽の契約について笑いながら話しているのを耳にしました。
Yes, ma'am, I just overheard them laughing and talking about the fake deal you are about to sign, she said. The Americans watched this exchange with growing confusion. Miller's smile faltered slightly. Is there a problem with the wine? He asked, his tone sharp. Mayumi set down the pen with deliberate care. Looking directly at Aaliyah, she gave the slightest nod.
はい、ありがとうございます。
Okay, thank you very much, Mayumi said. Then, with movements that spoke of decades of boardroom experience, Mayumi closed the document and slid it back across the table. She stood, smoothing her dress with elegant hands. Gentlemen, she said in her accented English, I apologize. I have received an urgent call. Emergency in Tokyo. She touched her phone, which had remained silent throughout dinner. We must reschedule. I will have my people contact your people. But, Miller started to rise, his face flushing. Mrs. Takashi, we had an agreement. The deadline. I am very sorry, Mayumi continued, already gathering her purse. Family emergency. You understand, yes. Family first, always. Turner grabbed the contract, his legal instincts kicking in. If you could just sign this preliminary agreement, we can work out the details later. But Mayumi was already moving toward the door, her designer heels clicking on the marble floor with the rhythm of finality. At the threshold, she paused and looked back, not at the men but at Aaliyah, who had retreated to her position by the service station. Their eyes met for a second time that evening, and Mayumi inclined her head slightly, a gesture that could have meant anything to an observer but spoke volumes to its recipient. Then she was gone, leaving behind three men whose carefully constructed plan was crumbling like wet sand. Yamamoto returned from the restroom to find his employer absent and the Americans in various states of distress. Where is Mrs. Takashi? He asked, genuine confusion in his voice. She left, Miller spat. Some emergency. This is highly unprofessional. If there is emergency, then there is emergency, Yamamoto replied with a shrug. I will await her instructions. The men had no choice but to leave, Turner clutching the unsigned contract like a life preserver. They paid the exorbitant bill with bitter expressions, their dreams of easy millions evaporating with each step toward the door. Aaliyah continued her shift as if nothing had happened, though her manager noticed she seemed distracted. She served other tables, cleared plates, and smiled at appropriate moments, all while replaying the evening's events in her mind. Had she done the right thing? Would there be consequences? Would Mayumi even believe her warning, or would she dismiss it as the overreaction of a meddling waitress? The next morning, in a penthouse suite at the Four Seasons, Mayumi sat across from her actual lawyer, Hiroshi Tanaka, a man who had served her family's interests for 2 decades. He had flown in from New York on the red-eye after receiving her urgent call. The contract is sophisticated, Tanaka said, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the document. On the surface, it appears to be a standard technology transfer and expansion agreement. But the devil, as they say, is in the details. He spread out several pages, pointing to specific clauses. Here, in Section 47B, buried in the subsidiary definitions, they've included language that would transfer not just the agreed-upon technology but all related patents and future developments. And here, he indicated another section. The arbitration clause specifies a court in the Cayman Islands, where shell companies can disappear overnight. And the 900 million? Mayumi asked, though she already suspected the answer. Would have been held in escrow by a company that, as far as I can determine, exists only on paper. The moment you signed, your technology rights would have transferred immediately, but the money would have been tied up in legal limbo indefinitely. He removed his glasses, rubbing his tired eyes. Mayumi-san, if you had signed this, Takashi Holdings would have lost not just money, but the core technology that drives 40% of your revenue. Mayumi stood and walked to the window, looking out over the Potomac. The morning sun painted the water gold, reminding her of the koi ponds at her estate in Kyoto. A young woman saved me, she said quietly. A waitress who spoke perfect Japanese. Extraordinary, Tanaka murmured. To find such a person in Washington, at exactly the right moment, the odds are astronomical. Not luck, Mayumi corrected. Courage. She risked her job to warn a stranger. She turned from the window, decision crystallizing in her eyes. I want you to find out everything about her. Discreetly. 3 days later, Aaliyah was just beginning her lunch shift when the restaurant manager approached her with an unusual expression. Somewhere between confusion and respect. There's someone here to see you, he said. A Mrs. Takashi. She's requested you personally. Aaliyah's heart skipped, but she kept her expression neutral. I'll be right there. Mayumi had taken a small table by the window this time. No entourage, no translators. She wore a simple but elegant navy suit, her hair in a low ponytail that made her look younger than her years. When Aaliyah approached, Mayumi gestured to the chair across from her. Please sit. Aaliyah glanced at her manager, who nodded with barely concealed curiosity. She sat carefully, her hands folded in her lap. I owe you a debt, Mayumi began without preamble. My lawyer has reviewed the contract. You saved me from losing nearly half my company's value. I only did what anyone would have done, Aaliyah replied softly. No, Mayumi's voice was firm. Most would have stayed silent, kept their job, minded their business. She studied the young woman across from her. Your Japanese is flawless. Where did you learn? And so Aaliyah found herself telling her story. The orphanage, the Yamadas, the years in Hiroshima learning not just a language but a way of being. She spoke of returning to America at 18 with dreams deferred by reality, of working in restaurants while figuring out what came next. Mayumi listened without interrupting, her dark eyes taking in every detail. When Aaliyah finished, silence stretched between them, comfortable rather than awkward. I would like to invite you to dinner, Mayumi said finally. Not here. At my home. This Saturday if you're free. Aaliyah blinked in surprise. Yes, of course. I'd be honored. Good. Mayumi stood, placing a business card on the table. My driver will pick you up at 7. And Miss Brooks. She paused at Aaliyah's look of surprise at hearing her name. I too believe in being thorough. Wear something comfortable. My son will be joining us, and he tends to make everything informal. The Takashi residence in Potomac was a study in understated elegance. Set back from the road behind gates and gardens, the house managed to be both imposing and welcoming. Aaliyah had agonized over what to wear, finally settling on a simple black dress that walked the line between casual and formal. The door was answered not by staff but by Mayumi herself, wearing jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than the dress but somehow looked effortless. Welcome, she said warmly, ushering Aaliyah inside. I hope you like sushi. My son insisted on making it himself, which means we may be ordering pizza later. As if summoned by the mention of potential culinary disaster, a young man appeared from what was presumably the kitchen, wearing an apron and a rueful expression. I heard that, mother. My sushi is perfectly adequate. Aaliyah, this is my son, Rio. Rio, this is the young woman I told you about. Rio Takashi was 25 years old and had inherited his mother's elegant bone structure along with a disarming smile that was entirely his own. He wiped his hands on his apron before offering one to Aaliyah. "The woman who saved my mother from corporate pirates," he said, his English carrying only the faintest trace of an accent. "I'm impressed. And grateful." Aaliyah shook his hand, noting the calluses that suggested he did more with his hands than just make amateur sushi. "I'm sure your mother would have figured it out on her own." "Perhaps," Mayumi interjected, "but not before signing. Come, let's see if Rio has destroyed my kitchen." The kitchen was indeed a disaster zone of rice, nori sheets, and various fish arrangements that suggested enthusiasm rather than expertise. Rio grinned sheepishly at the mess. "I may have been overly ambitious," he admitted. "I watched 3 YouTube videos and thought I was ready to open a restaurant." 3 whole videos. Aaliyah found herself smiling. "Practically a master chef." "Exactly what I thought." Rio's eyes lit up with humor. "Though the tuna seems to disagree. It's staging a rebellion." As they worked together to salvage dinner, Mayumi directing operations with the same quiet authority she used in boardrooms, Aaliyah felt something she hadn't experienced since leaving Japan. The warmth of being included, of being part of something that felt like family. Over dinner, which turned out surprisingly well, despite Rio's protestations of impending disaster, the conversation flowed as easily as the sake Mayumi poured. They spoke in a mixture of English and Japanese, switching between languages with the fluid ease of those who lived between worlds. "Tell me," Mayumi said as they moved to the living room for tea, "what did you study in Japan?" "Everything I could," Aaliyah replied. "My foster parents believed in education. I studied at local schools, but also took additional classes in language, history, culture. Hiroshi-san, my foster father, used to say that language without culture is just noise." "Wise man," Rio commented from his position by the fireplace. "Though I bet he didn't anticipate his daughter using those skills to expose corporate fraud in a Georgetown restaurant." "Life rarely goes as anticipated," Mayumi observed. "Which brings me to why I really invited you here tonight." She set down her teacup with deliberate care. "I've been thinking about your situation. You have remarkable skills that are being wasted carrying plates." Aaliyah felt her defenses rising slightly. "It's honest work." "Of course it is," Mayumi agreed quickly. "I didn't mean to imply otherwise. But you could be doing so much more. Have you considered returning to school?" "I've thought about it," Aaliyah admitted. "But international students who return to the U.S. face certain financial realities. What if those realities could be addressed?" Mayumi leaned forward slightly. "Takashi Holdings has a foundation. We provide scholarships for exceptional individuals, particularly those with language skills and cross-cultural understanding. I think you would be an ideal candidate." Aaliyah's hands stilled on her teacup. "Mrs. Takashi, I can't accept." "You saved me $900 million, Mayumi interrupted gently. "A scholarship seems like a very small return on that investment. Besides, this isn't charity. We need people like you. People who can navigate between worlds, who understand that business is about more than just contracts and numbers." "Mother's right," Rio added, moving to sit across from Aaliyah. "The foundation isn't just about giving money away. It's about investing in people who can make a difference. And you've already proven you can do that." The offer hung in the air between them, shimmering with possibility. Aaliyah thought of her small apartment, her double shifts, the dream she'd carefully packed away like winter clothes in summer. "What would you study?" Rio asked, his tone curious rather than pressuring. "If you could do anything?" "Languages. Aaliyah answered without hesitation. Not just Japanese and English, but Chinese, Korean, maybe Arabic. International relations. The world is getting smaller, but the need for real understanding is growing. Georgetown has an excellent program, Mayumi mentioned casually. The School of Foreign Service. Very competitive, but I think you'd do well there. As the evening progressed, Aaliyah found herself relaxing into the conversation. Rio, she discovered, had studied at MIT before returning to help with the family business. He shared stories of his own struggles with cultural identity. Japanese in America, American in Japan, never quite fitting perfectly in either place. The hyphen life, he called it, making a gesture between 2 points. Japanese-American. Always suspended between 2 worlds. But that's what makes you valuable, Aaliyah pointed out. You can see both sides. Understand both perspectives. Their eyes met across the coffee table, and something passed between them, a recognition perhaps of kindred spirits navigating similar waters. Mayumi observed this interaction with the subtle satisfaction of a mother who sees what others might miss. She rose gracefully. I should check on some emails. Rio, why don't you show Aaliyah the garden? The moon is particularly beautiful tonight. The garden was indeed beautiful, a carefully cultivated piece of Japan transplanted to Maryland soil. Stone lanterns cast soft shadows across gravel paths, and somewhere in the darkness, water trickled over rocks in a fountain designed to sound like a mountain stream. She's not subtle, is she? Rio said with an affectionate laugh. My mother, I mean. She's very kind, Aaliyah replied diplomatically. She's many things, Rio agreed, but subtle isn't one of them. He paused by a bench overlooking a small koi pond. She's also usually right about people. She saw something in you that night at the restaurant. So did I when she told me the story. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fish move like living brushstrokes beneath the water's surface. The night air carried the scent of jasmine and something else. Possibility, perhaps. If you do accept the scholarship, Rio said eventually, I could help. With applications, recommendations, navigating the system. I remember how overwhelming it all was. Why would you do that? Aaliyah asked, genuinely curious. He turned to look at her, moonlight catching the angles of his face. Because you helped my mother when you had nothing to gain and everything to lose. Because you speak my language. Both of them. Because. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Because I think you're remarkable, and the world needs more remarkable people doing remarkable things. The moment stretched between them, delicate as spider silk and just as strong. Then Aaliyah smiled, breaking the tension. Your mother said you make everything informal. She wasn't wrong. It's a gift, Rio replied with mock solemnity. Or a curse, depending on who you ask. My board of directors, for instance, still hasn't recovered from the meeting where I suggested we conduct business in bean-bag chairs. Did you actually? No, but I thought about it. Very seriously. They were laughing when Mayumi found them an hour later, discussing everything from the challenges of maintaining a Japanese garden in Maryland whether to the best hole-in-the-wall ramen shops in D.C. I hate to interrupt, Mayumi said, though her expression suggested otherwise, but it's getting late. Aaliyah, my driver will take you home whenever you're ready. As they walked back through the house, Mayumi handed Aaliyah a folder. Information about the scholarship, she explained. Take your time. Think it over. The offer stands regardless of your decision. At the door, Rio surprised them both by speaking in Japanese. It was truly a pleasure meeting you, Aaliyah-san. I hope this isn't the last time. Aaliyah responded in kind, her voice formal but warm. The pleasure was mine. Thank you for the sushi. And the conversation. The sushi was terrible, he said cheerfully. But the conversation was excellent. In the car on the way home, Aaliyah clutched the folder and replayed the evening in her mind. It felt surreal, like something from a movie rather than her actual life. Yet the weight of the paper in her hands was undeniably real. Her phone buzzed with a text. An unknown number, but the message made her smile. "This is Rio. Mother gave me your number. I hope that's okay. Just wanted to say thank you again for tonight. And if you need any help with those applications, I'm serious about the offer. Also, I'm definitely taking more than 3 sushi making classes." She typed back, "Only 3 more? Still won't be enough. But I appreciate the dedication to improvement." His response came quickly. "How many do you recommend?" "At least 10. Maybe 20. Sushi is serious business." "Noted. 20 classes it is. I'll report back with progress." Aaliyah found herself smiling at her phone like a teenager, then caught herself. This was complicated. The scholarship, the family that offered it, the son who made her laugh. But for the first time in 3 years, complicated felt like possibility rather than problem. Over the following weeks, life took on a rhythm of change. Aaliyah continued her shifts at the restaurant but began spending her free time on applications. True to his word, Rio helped. Meeting her at coffee shops with his laptop, reviewing essays, explaining the Byzantine process of financial aid forms. "You don't have to do this," she told him one afternoon at a Starbucks near DuPont Circle. "I'm sure you have actual work to do." "I am working," he protested, gesturing at his laptop screen. "I'm investing in future talent for Takashi Holdings. Very serious business." "Is that what this is?" He looked up from the screen, his expression shifting from playful to sincere. "Partly. But mostly, I enjoy spending time with you. You challenge me. Make me think. Plus, you're the only person I know who can properly appreciate the disaster that was my sushi attempt." "It's improving," Aaliyah admitted. He'd been sending her photos of his culinary experiments, each one slightly less catastrophic than the last. The last one almost looked edible. High praise indeed. Their meetings became a regular occurrence, ostensibly focused on applications but increasingly ranging into other territories. They discussed books, debated politics, shared stories of cultural confusion and adaptation. Rio taught her business Japanese, the formal language of contracts and negotiations that differed from the conversational Japanese she knew. She helped him with his Mandarin, a language he was learning for expansion into Chinese markets. "You're a natural teacher," he told her one evening as they walked along the tidal basin. "Cherry blossoms long gone, but the path still beautiful in autumn light. Have you considered that as a career?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "But I think I want to do more than just teach language. I want to help people understand each other, really understand. Not just words but meaning, context, culture. Like you did for my mother. That was different. That was just doing the right thing." Rio stopped walking, turning to face her. "That's exactly what I mean. You saw past language to intention, past words to meaning. That's a rare gift." The moment hung between them, charged with unspoken possibility. Then Aaliyah's phone rang, breaking the spell. It was her manager at the restaurant, asking if she could cover an extra shift. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "I'll drive you," Rio offered, as he always did. "You don't have to." "I know." His smile was soft. "I want to." The acceptance letter from Georgetown arrived on a Tuesday in March, along with a full scholarship from the Takashi Foundation. Aaliyah stared at the papers for a long moment, then called the one person she most wanted to tell. "I got in," she said when Rio answered, her voice breathless with excitement and disbelief. "Of course you did," he replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. I never doubted it for a moment. We need to celebrate. Dinner tonight? Somewhere with better sushi than I can make. That evening, Mayumi joined them at a small Japanese restaurant in Alexandria. The kind of place that didn't look like much from the outside but served food that transported you straight to Tokyo. To new beginnings, Mayumi said, raising her sake cup. And to the courage to pursue them. As they toasted, Aaliyah felt the weight of the past year lifting. The scared girl who'd returned from Japan with nothing but memories and language skills was transforming into someone new. Someone with purpose and direction. I want you to know, Mayumi said as they waited for their food. The scholarship comes with no strings. No obligation to work for us. No requirements beyond maintaining your grades. This is an investment in you, not a contract. Though we hope you'll remember us when you're running the UN, Rio added with a grin. The UN? Aaliyah laughed. I think you're overestimating. No, Mayumi interrupted gently. I don't think we are. The months that followed passed in a blur of preparation and change. Aaliyah gave notice at the restaurant. Her manager sorry to see her go but proud of her next steps. She found a small apartment near campus. Rio helping her move with enthusiasm that belied his complete lack of experience with manual labor. I think this box of books weighs more than my car, he groaned, struggling up the stairs. Those are just the language dictionaries, Aaliyah called from above. Wait until you see the literature collection. You're trying to kill me, he accused, but he was smiling. They spent the day arranging furniture, hanging pictures, transforming empty space into something that felt like home. As evening fell, they sat on the floor eating takeout, surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked. Thank you, Aaliyah said quietly. For everything. The help with applications, the moving, the friendship. I don't know how to repay. Stop, Rio said firmly. Friendship isn't a transaction. You don't repay it. You just live it. Their eyes met across the takeout containers, and Aaliyah felt that familiar flutter in her chest, the one she'd been trying to ignore for months. It was complicated, she reminded herself. He was her benefactor's son. She was starting a new chapter. This wasn't the time for whatever this was becoming. But Rio seemed to read her thoughts. I know, he said softly. Complicated. But maybe. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Maybe we don't have to figure it all out right now. Maybe we can just be friends who care about each other and see where life takes us. Aaliyah nodded, grateful for his understanding. I'd like that. Good. He raised his paper cup of soda in a mock toast. To friendship and possibilities. To friendship and possibilities, she echoed. Classes at Georgetown challenged her in ways she'd never imagined. The School of Foreign Service was intense, demanding not just language proficiency but deep understanding of international relations, economics, history. Aaliyah threw herself into the work with determination born from years of deferred dreams. She excelled, her unique background giving her perspectives that enriched classroom discussions. Professors took notice. Classmates sought her out for study groups. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Rio remained a constant presence, though respectful of her need to focus on studies. He'd text encouragement before big exams, meet her for coffee when she needed a break, celebrate her successes with quiet pride. A's across the board, he said, looking at her first semester grades over lunch. I'm not surprised, but I am impressed. It's just the beginning, Aaliyah replied, but she was smiling. The beginning of something amazing, he agreed. Mayumi invited her for dinner once a month, these gatherings becoming a cherished tradition. They'd discuss business, politics, culture. Mayumi treating Aaliyah not as a scholarship recipient but as a peer, someone whose opinions mattered. I'm thinking of expanding into Southeast Asia, Mayumi mentioned one evening. But I'm concerned about the cultural nuances. The business practices are different, the relationships more complex. You need cultural ambassadors, Aaliyah suggested. Not just translators but people who understand the unspoken rules, the subtle dynamics. Exactly. Mayumi smiled. Interested in a summer internship? And so Aaliyah found herself spending the summer between her junior and senior years working for Takashi Holdings, not as an assistant but as a cultural consultant. She helped prepare executives for overseas meetings, reviewed contracts for cultural sensitivity, built bridges between Eastern and Western business practices. You're a natural, Rio told her as they reviewed a successful negotiation with a Thai manufacturing firm. You see what others miss. It's just about paying attention, Aaliyah deflected. Listening to what's not being said. Like you did that night at the restaurant. That was different. Was it? He leaned back in his chair, studying her. I don't think so. I think you've always seen beneath the surface. It's what makes you special. The words hung in the air between them, heavier than professional feedback. Over the years of their friendship, the attraction between them had only grown stronger, but they'd both been careful to maintain boundaries. Now, with Aaliyah close to graduation, those boundaries seemed less necessary and more like obstacles. Rio, she began, but he held up a hand. I know. You need to focus on your finals. Get through graduation. I'm not going anywhere. She smiled, grateful again for his patience. Thank you. For understanding. For waiting. Some things are worth waiting for, he replied simply. Graduation day dawned bright and clear, a perfect May morning in Washington. Aaliyah stood in her cap and gown, diploma in hand, surrounded by the Takashi family who'd become her own. As Rio's hand found hers, she realized her journey from that restaurant night to this moment was just the beginning. Thank you for experiencing Aaliyah's incredible journey with us. Her story proves one act of courage can change everything. Watch out for part 2 that reveals deeper conspiracies and stronger bonds. Subscribe now so you don't miss what happens when love meets loyalty.